I'm standing in a probate attorney's conference room, staring at documents that supposedly have my dead grandmother's signature on them. Documents I've never seen before. Documents that give my mother-in-law, the woman who spent years insulting me, complete control over my $420,000 inheritance. The rental property generating $2,200 a month that Grandma Ruth explicitly left to me? My mother-in-law Diane just announced she's protecting the family from my financial irresponsibility. And my husband is nodding along like this makes perfect sense. The attorney looks uncomfortable, but says these papers, if valid, legally override the original will. Diane is smirking at me across the table. But let me back up and tell you how I got here, and how I made sure Diane's criminal scheme backfired in the most satisfying way possible. Hey everyone, welcome back. If this is your first time here, I share real stories of family betrayal and the satisfying justice that followed. If you've ever dealt with an in-law who treated you like garbage while pretending to care about family, this one's for you. If you find this story valuable, I'd appreciate your support, a like, a comment, or joining this community for more stories like this. Drop a comment about your own toxic in-law experiences. I read every single one and you're not alone in this. Now, let's get into it. My name is Madison Wright, but everyone calls me Maddie. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a hospital clinical coordinator in Nashville, Tennessee, earning $72,000 a year. I've been married to Tyler for 7 years, and we have one son, Jackson, who's 5 years old. We live in a modest 3-bedroom house in the East Nashville area, nothing fancy, but it's home. Before I tell you about the inheritance disaster, you need to understand my relationship with my grandmother Ruth. She wasn't just my grandmother, she raised me. My mother died in a car accident when I was 8 years old, and my father couldn't handle single parenthood. Grandma Ruth stepped in immediately. She moved me into her house, enrolled me in a good school district, and gave me the stable childhood I desperately needed. Ruth was extraordinary. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years, lived modestly, and invested carefully in real estate over decades. By the time she retired, she owned her house free and clear plus a small rental property that brought in steady income. She was worth about $420,000, not wealthy by Nashville standards, but comfortable. More importantly, she was my person. We talked on the phone every single day. I spent every weekend at her house helping with yard work, cooking together, and just being together. Ruth made it explicitly clear throughout my adult life that everything would come to me. "You're the one who showed up, Madison," she'd say. "You're the one who cares. This is all for you and Jackson." She'd even taken me to her attorney's office to review her will, making sure I understood her wishes. Then I married Tyler Wright, and my life got complicated. Tyler himself is a good man, a decent husband, and wonderful father. He's a project manager for a construction company, earns about $65,000 a year, and we make a solid middle-class life together. The problem isn't Tyler. The problem is his mother. Diane Wright is 61 years old and styles herself as a financial expert despite having exactly 0 qualifications to back that up. She's a former real estate broker whose license lapsed years ago after a series of failed business ventures. There was the boutique that went bankrupt within 18 months. The property investment scheme that ended in a lawsuit. The pyramid marketing thing that alienated half her friend group. But Diane talks like she's Warren Buffett, constantly lecturing people about money management while her own finances are a disaster. From the moment Tyler introduced us, Diane made her opinion clear. I wasn't good enough for her son. My job wasn't prestigious enough. My education, a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration, was insufficient. My family background, working class, raised by a grandmother, was embarrassing. Even my appearance was subject to critique. At our rehearsal dinner 7 years ago, Diane literally pulled Tyler aside. I overheard from the bathroom hallway and said, "It's not too late to reconsider. You could do so much better than a girl from that background." Tyler defended me, but the damage was done. That comment lives in my head rent-free. Over the years, Diane's criticisms continued. When Jackson was born, she questioned my parenting choices constantly. Breast versus formula, sleep training, daycare selection, everything I did was wrong according to Diane. She'd make comments like, "Well, In MY Day, we knew how to raise children properly, with that condescending tone that made my blood boil. But the real tension started when Grandma Ruth had a stroke 3 years ago. Ruth survived, thank God, but her recovery was long and difficult. As her closest family member and a healthcare professional, I became her medical power of attorney. I coordinated all her care, attended every doctor's appointment, managed her medications, handled her finances, and spent every spare moment making sure she was comfortable. Diane, who'd never met Ruth before, suddenly started making comments. At a family dinner one Sunday evening, she said in front of everyone, "It's interesting how Madison suddenly became so devoted once there was an inheritance involved." The table went silent. Tyler mumbled something about me always being close to Ruth, but he didn't really defend me strongly. That hurt. The comments continued. "Playing nurse for inheritance money, Madison? Making sure you stay in the will, I see." It was disgusting, especially since Diane herself had been pestering Tyler about his own parents' estate planning. His father had passed away years earlier, leaving everything to Diane. Despite the stress of caregiving and dealing with Diane's toxicity, those 3 years with Ruth were precious. We spent countless afternoons together, reminiscing about my childhood, talking about Jackson, and planning for the future. Ruth was adamant about her wishes. "Everything goes to you, Madison. Tyler's family is well off enough. This is for you and my great-grandson. I've made it crystal clear in my will." Last fall, Grandma Ruth died peacefully in her sleep. She was 87 years old. I was devastated. Tyler was supportive during my grief, but Diane? At the funeral reception, she said to another relative, again, loud enough for me to hear, "Well, at least Madison got what she wanted out of this relationship." I wanted to scream, but I held it together because it was Grandma's funeral and I wasn't going to cause a scene. The will reading was scheduled for 3 weeks after the funeral. Ruth's attorney, Michael Henderson, had been her lawyer for over 20 years. I'd met him multiple times when Ruth reviewed her estate planning. I knew exactly what the will said, everything to me, with specific instructions that Tyler's family was to have no involvement whatsoever in the estate. The morning of the will reading, I dressed carefully in a black sheath dress and pearl earrings, Ruth's pearls, actually. Tyler and I drove to the attorney's office in downtown Nashville. I was nervous but prepared. This inheritance would change our lives. We could finally pay off our mortgage, fund Jackson's college education, and have real financial security. The rental property alone would provide steady income. We arrived at Michael Henderson's office at 10 a.m. The reception area had that hushed, professional atmosphere typical of law offices: dark wood, leather chairs, watercolor paintings of Tennessee landscapes. Michael's assistant offered us coffee. Then Diane walked in. I froze. "What is she doing here?" I whispered to Tyler. He looked uncomfortable. "Mom said she wanted to support me during this difficult time." I told her it was just us, but she insisted. Diane was dressed in an expensive burgundy suit, carrying a designer handbag, her highlighted hair perfectly styled. She gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Madison, dear. I'm here as Tyler's mother to provide family support. I hope that's not a problem." It absolutely was a problem, but what could I say? We were ushered into the conference room. Michael Henderson sat at the head of the table, a thick folder in front of him containing Ruth's estate documents. He nodded at all of us professionally. "Let's begin," Michael said. He opened the folder and started reading the standard legal language. Then he got to the meat of it. "I, Ruth Eleanor Mitchell, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath my entire estate to my granddaughter, Madison Marie Wright, including my primary residence, rental property, investment accounts, and all personal possessions. I explicitly state that Tyler Wright's family members are to have no involvement in the administration of this estate." I felt a wave of relief. There it was, in plain language. Michael continued reading the asset details: $285,000 in investment accounts, the paid-off primary residence valued at approximately $210,000, and the rental property generating $2,200 monthly. After estate taxes and final expenses, I was looking at about $420,000. I reached for Tyler's hand under the table. He squeezed it. This was really happening. That's when Diane stood up. "Excuse me, Michael," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Before we proceed, there's something everyone needs to see. I've been protecting this family from a very serious situation." My stomach dropped. What was she talking about? Diane pulled a manila envelope from her expensive handbag and slid it across the table to Michael. "These are documents I discovered among Ruth's papers shortly after her passing. They reveal a trust arrangement that supersedes the original will." Michael frowned, opening the envelope. He pulled out several official-looking pages and began reading. His expression shifted from professional calm to visible confusion. "What is this?" I demanded. Diane's smile widened. "Ruth and I had several conversations before she passed about her concerns regarding Madison's financial responsibility. These documents establish me as trustee of Ruth's estate, with authority to manage and distribute funds on Madison's behalf until she reaches age 45. It was Ruth's way of protecting her legacy from Madison's poor judgment." The room started spinning. "That's insane. Grandma Ruth would never." "Of course you'd say that," Diane interrupted smoothly. "But the documentation is right there. Ruth was concerned about your impulse control, your lack of financial literacy, and, frankly, your mental stability. She confided in me about her worries and asked me, as someone with financial expertise, to protect the inheritance." "This is a lie." I turned to Michael. "Tell her this is impossible. You were there when Ruth reviewed her will. She specifically excluded Tyler's family." Michael was examining the documents with increasing concern. "These papers appear to have Mrs. Mitchell's signature and a notary seal. They're dated 4 months before her death. If valid, they would indeed grant Mrs. Diane Wright authority as trustee to manage the estate distribution." "If valid," I practically shouted. "Michael, you know Ruth. You know her wishes." He looked genuinely troubled. "Madison, I understand your distress. But legally, if these documents are authentic, they represent Ruth's most recent wishes. I'll need to verify their legitimacy, but I'm legally obligated to take them seriously." Diane leaned back in her chair, radiating satisfaction. "I understand this is difficult, Madison. But Ruth wanted someone responsible overseeing her hard-earned money. She knew you'd waste it on unnecessary expenses or make poor investment choices. This way, the inheritance will be preserved for Jackson's future, distributed responsibly over time." I looked at Tyler desperately. "You cannot possibly believe this." But Tyler's face showed hesitation. "Maddie, I mean, Mom does have financial experience. And if Grandma Ruth really did have concerns..." Grandma Ruth had no concerns. I was shaking. "Your mother is lying." Diane's voice became sharp. "I have documentation, Madison. You have hysterics. Which do you think holds more weight legally?" Michael cleared his throat. "Everyone, please. I need time to examine these documents thoroughly. There are procedures for validating estate papers. Madison, I recommend you retain your own attorney." "Mrs. Wright," he addressed Diane, "I'll need to verify the notarization, confirm the signatures, and review the circumstances under which these papers were created." "Of course," Diane said graciously. "I want everything properly vetted. I'm simply doing my duty to honor Ruth's true wishes and protect this family." The meeting ended in chaos. I was crying angry tears. Tyler was caught between us, looking miserable. Diane left with a parting shot. "Madison, dear, once you calm down, you'll see this is for the best. I'll make sure the funds are invested properly and distributed appropriately. You'll thank me eventually." Over the following week, I fell apart. I called Michael's office daily. He was sympathetic but firm. He needed to do due diligence on Diane's documents. The probate process was now on hold. Tyler and I fought constantly. He kept saying, "Maybe we should just work with Mom. She's not trying to steal the money, just manage it responsibly." "Your mother is a fraud," I screamed during one particularly brutal argument. "She's never managed money successfully in her life. Everything she touches turns to bankruptcy." "That's not fair, Maddie. She's had bad luck with some ventures, but..." "Bad luck?" "She's a con artist. And now she's conning her way into my inheritance." But what hurt most was the doubt I saw in Tyler's eyes. Some part of him believed his mother's narrative about my financial irresponsibility. Never mind that I'd been managing Ruth's finances flawlessly for 3 years. Never mind that Tyler and I had never had money problems because I budgeted carefully. His mother's poison had seeped in. I spent sleepless nights researching. How could Diane have gotten Ruth's signature? When would she have had access to Ruth's estate planning? Then I remembered something. 6 months before Ruth died, Diane had asked Tyler about his grandmother-in-law's health status. At the time, I'd thought it was just polite conversation. But Diane had pressed for details, which doctors Ruth was seeing, which attorney managed her estate. Tyler, trying to be helpful, had mentioned Michael Henderson's name. Little did I know what I was about to discover. I called Michael's office and asked to speak with him privately, without Tyler or Diane present. 2 days later, I sat across from him in that same conference room. "Michael, I need to ask you something. Has Diane Wright ever visited this office before the will reading?" He hesitated. "Madison, I'm not sure I should. Please. This is my grandmother's legacy. If there's something suspicious, I need to know." Michael sighed. He pulled up his office's visitor log on his computer. 6 months ago, Mrs. Diane Wright came here asking about estate planning procedures. She claimed to be interested in updating her own will and wanted to understand Tennessee estate law. My receptionist showed her some general informational brochures. Did she have access to any documents? Not officially. But Michael's face darkened. My receptionist mentioned that Mrs. Wright was in the waiting room for approximately 20 minutes when the receptionist had to step away for an emergency phone call. When she returned, Mrs. Wright was standing near the file area. My heart pounded. "Do you have security cameras?" "We do. But the footage is typically only retained for 90 days unless there's an incident. Can you check if it still exists from 6 months ago?" "Madison, even if it does exist, what would it prove?" "That your mother-in-law is a criminal," I said quietly. I left Michael's office that afternoon with a plan forming. If Diane had forged those documents, and I was absolutely certain she had, I needed proof. Professional, irrefutable proof. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus on coordinating patient care when my entire future was being stolen. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started researching forensic document examiners in Tennessee. I found Patricia Hayes, a certified forensic document examiner in Memphis with over 20 years of experience testifying in court cases. Her credentials were impressive: certifications from multiple forensic organizations, expert witness testimony in fraud cases, published papers on signature analysis. Her consultation fee was $500, with full analysis starting at $3,500. I called her immediately. Patricia listened to my situation and said firmly, "If these documents are forged, I'll find the evidence. Email me everything you have, and let's set up a meeting." Within 2 days, I drove to Memphis with copies of everything: Diane's supposed trust documents, Ruth's original will with authentic signatures, and any other estate paperwork I could access. Patricia met me in her office, a professional space filled with microscopes, specialized lighting equipment, and analysis software. She examined the trust documents carefully, taking detailed photographs under various lighting conditions. These signatures need to be compared to authenticated samples of Mrs. Mitchell's writing. I'll analyze pen pressure, stroke patterns, letter formation, and aging characteristics of the ink. How long will this take? 2 weeks for a preliminary analysis. 4 weeks for a complete forensic report suitable for legal proceedings. It's not cheap, Madison. This level of analysis will cost $3,500. I thought about our savings account. We had about $8,000 saved for emergencies. This qualified. Do it. I need to know the truth. I paid her retainer that day and drove back to Nashville feeling a mixture of hope and terror. What if somehow the documents were real? What if Ruth had secretly harbored doubts about me? No. I pushed that thought away. Ruth loved me. She'd told me 1,000 times. Diane was a liar, and I'd prove it. While waiting for Patricia's analysis, I retained an estate litigation attorney. James Sullivan came highly recommended, a tough lawyer with experience in fraud cases. His initial consultation was $350, but after hearing my story, he offered to work on a contingency plus hourly basis if my case was strong. If we can prove forgery, You'll win decisively, James said during our first meeting. But we need that forensic evidence. Document forgery is a felony in Tennessee. If Mrs. Wright fabricated those papers, she's committed multiple serious crimes. What about Michael Henderson? He's being so cautious. He has to be. If he proceeded with the original will and those trust documents were somehow authentic, he'd face legal liability. Once we present the forgery evidence, he'll move quickly to dismiss the fraudulent papers. Over the next 2 weeks, I investigated everything I could about Diane's history. I pulled public records showing her bankruptcy from 11 years earlier, failed business debts totaling $87,000. I found court records of the property investment lawsuit where she'd been sued for misrepresenting property values to investors. I documented her pattern of financial disasters. I also dug into the timeline. When exactly had Diane visited Michael's office? I requested and received Michael's visitor log showing Diane Wright's visit 6 months before Ruth's death, right around the time these supposed trust documents were dated. Then came the breakthrough. Patricia called me 3 weeks after our meeting. Madison, you need to sit down. I have your answer. My hands trembled as I gripped the phone. What did you find? These trust documents are sophisticated forgeries, but they're forgeries nonetheless. Mrs. Mitchell's signature on the trust papers was created using digital manipulation. Someone photographed or scanned her authentic signature from the original will, then digitally placed it onto new documents and printed them. The ink analysis shows it's standard laser printer ink, not the ballpoint pen ink from her authenticated signatures. The pen pressure is completely absent. It's a flat reproduction. Oh my God. There's more. The notary seal on the documents is fake. I contacted the notary whose information appears on the seal. She confirmed she never notarized any documents for Ruth Mitchell or Diane Wright. Someone created a replica of her official seal, probably using publicly available images from legitimate notarizations. Can you testify to all this in court? Absolutely. I'll prepare a comprehensive forensic report documenting every finding. This forgery was sophisticated enough to fool a casual observer, but under forensic examination, it's clearly fraudulent. I hung up and immediately called James Sullivan. We have the proof. The documents are forged. Then we move immediately. I'm filing an emergency motion to invalidate the fraudulent papers and restore the original will. We'll also file police reports for forgery and fraud. Madison, this is now a criminal matter. Within 2 days, James filed motions with the probate court, attached Patricia Hayes' preliminary forensic report, and requested an expedited hearing. He also contacted Nashville Metro Police to file formal criminal complaints against Diane Wright for forgery, fraud, theft by deception, and identity theft. I'll never forget the day the police called Diane for questioning. Tyler came home from work pale and shaken. The police contacted my mother. They're investigating her for forgery. Maddie, what did you do? What did I do? I proved your mother is a criminal. Read this. I handed him Patricia's forensic report. Tyler read it slowly, his face crumbling as the reality sank in. The signature analysis. The fake notary seal. The timeline showing Diane's suspicious visit to Michael's office. The evidence was overwhelming. She really did this, he whispered. Mom really forged those documents. Yes, she really did. And you chose to believe her over me. That hurt him, I could see it. But it was true. For weeks, he'd given his mother the benefit of the doubt while I'd been screaming the truth. But the revenge planning wasn't finished. James had one more card to play. Madison, Diane's real estate broker license lapsed 7 years ago. But she's been representing herself as a financial expert and licensed broker to lend credibility to her claims. That's a legal misrepresentation. We're reporting her to Tennessee's Department of Commerce and Insurance. Everything was coming together. The forensic evidence. The criminal investigation. The regulatory complaints. Diane's perfect facade was cracking. The court scheduled an emergency hearing for 3 months after I'd filed the motions. 3 months of waiting while the legal machinery ground forward. 3 months of Tyler grappling with his mother's betrayal. 3 months of me barely sleeping, terrified that somehow Diane would slip through the cracks. But I also used that time to gather every piece of evidence I could find. I interviewed Ruth's healthcare providers, getting statements about Ruth's mental clarity right up until her death. I collected emails between Ruth and me discussing the inheritance. I documented every snide comment Diane had made about me over the years, building a pattern of hostility and motive. Most importantly, I got a critical piece of evidence from Michael Henderson's office. After I'd mentioned the security footage, Michael had checked with his building management. By some miracle, the footage from 6 months ago was still archived. The building kept extended records due to a prior security incident. The footage showed everything. Diane in the waiting room, waiting until the receptionist left. Diane standing up, walking to the file area. Diane quickly photographing multiple documents with her phone. Diane returning to her seat seconds before the receptionist came back. She'd stolen information from Ruth's file, including signature samples and estate document formats, to create her forgeries. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late winter. I dressed in a navy suit, wanting to project professionalism and credibility. Tyler drove us to the courthouse, quiet and tense. He'd been wrestling with his mother's criminality for months now, and the reality had fundamentally changed our marriage dynamics. Diane arrived with her own attorney, a nervous-looking man named Richard Patterson, who clearly knew his client was in deep trouble. Diane herself looked different. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by stress lines around her eyes and mouth. Her usual perfect appearance was slightly disheveled. Michael Henderson was there as a witness. So was Patricia Hayes with her complete forensic report. And so were 2 detectives from the Metro Nashville Police Department's fraud unit. The courtroom was standard for probate matters, wood paneling, rows of benches, the judge's elevated bench. The Honorable Judge Sandra Martinez presided, a woman in her late 50s known for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for fraud. James Sullivan presented our case methodically. He started with Patricia Hayes' forensic analysis. Patricia testified for 45 minutes, walking the judge through every technical detail. She presented side-by-side photographs of Ruth's authentic signature versus the forged signature on the trust documents. She explained the ink analysis, the pen pressure measurements, the digital manipulation evidence. Your Honor, these signatures are not handwritten by Ruth Mitchell. They are digital reproductions placed onto fraudulent documents. The notary seal is likewise fake. I've confirmed this with the actual notary whose information was used. These documents are sophisticated forgeries designed to steal a $420,000 estate. Judge Martinez listened intently, asking technical questions that Patricia answered with professional precision. Then James introduced the security footage from Michael Henderson's office. The courtroom watched in silence as Diane photographed documents in the file area, her actions clearly visible on the screen. Your Honor, James said, this footage shows Mrs. Diane Wright accessing confidential estate documents belonging to Ruth Mitchell without authorization. These documents provided the signature samples and estate format information necessary to create the forgeries. Diane's attorney tried to object. Your Honor, being in a waiting room isn't proof of forgery. Counselor, Judge Martinez interrupted coldly. Watching someone photograph confidential documents immediately before forged versions of those documents appear is exactly proof of forgery. Continue, Mr. Sullivan. James then presented Michael Henderson's testimony. Michael described Diane's visit, her questions about estate procedures, and most damning, his notes from Ruth's final meeting with him 2 weeks before she died. Michael read from his legal pad, client adamant, Madison Wright is sole beneficiary. Absolutely no involvement from son-in-law's family, specifically no involvement from daughter-in-law's mother-in-law Diane Wright. Client specifically concerned about Mrs. Diane Wright's past financial issues and character. Client states, that woman will try to get her hands on this money. I'm making it crystal clear she gets nothing. The courtroom went silent. Ruth's final words, preserved in her attorney's notes, demolished any claim that she'd wanted Diane involved in her estate. James continued building the case, Diane's history of financial failures, her bankruptcy, her motivations, her pattern of criticism toward Madison. He presented email chains showing Ruth's explicit instructions that everything go to me. He called Ruth's doctor, who testified about Ruth's mental sharpness until the very end. Then it was Diane's attorney's turn. Richard Patterson did his best, but what could he say? He tried claiming Diane had good intentions and was trying to protect the family. He suggested maybe Ruth had changed her mind and mentioned it to Diane privately. So where's the proof? Judge Martinez asked sharply. Where's any evidence of these alleged conversations? Where's Ruth Mitchell's authentic signature on these trust documents? Where's the legitimate notarization? Patterson had nothing. Your Honor, my client maintains she believed these documents were valid. Your client created these documents. James interjected. The forensic evidence, the security footage, the motive, the timeline, everything points to deliberate, calculated fraud. Judge Martinez had heard enough. She called a 30-minute recess to review all the evidence, then returned with her ruling. I've reviewed the forensic analysis, the witness testimony, the security footage, and the documented pattern of behavior. The evidence is overwhelming and frankly disturbing. The trust documents presented by Mrs. Diane Wright are conclusively proven to be forgeries. They are hereby declared null and void. I grabbed Tyler's hand. This was it. Ruth Mitchell's original will is the authentic expression of her testamentary wishes. Madison Marie Wright is the sole beneficiary of the estate, which will be distributed according to the original will's terms. Relief flooded through me. I was crying, but trying to stay composed. Judge Martinez wasn't done. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the Davidson County District Attorney for criminal prosecution. Mrs. Wright, you have committed serious felonies, forgery, fraud, identity theft, and theft by deception. The estimated value of the estate you attempted to steal is $420,000, making these Class B and Class C felonies under Tennessee law. Diane's face went white. Her attorney tried to speak, but Judge Martinez raised her hand. I'm also ordering Mrs. Wright to pay Madison Wright's attorney fees and investigation costs. According to the invoices submitted, that's $20,000 for legal fees plus $3,500 for forensic analysis, totaling $23,500. My jaw dropped. I'd been prepared to eat those costs. But the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm awarding $15,000 in punitive damages to Mrs. Wright, Madison Wright, to compensate for the emotional distress, the delayed inheritance distribution, and the malicious nature of this fraud. Total judgment against Diane Wright, $38,500, payable within 60 days. Diane was sobbing now. Tyler stared at his mother in disbelief. Over the following weeks, the criminal case proceeded. The district attorney's office took it seriously. Financial elder abuse, even attempted abuse of a deceased person's estate, was a priority crime. Diane was formally charged with multiple felonies. Her attorney negotiated a plea deal. Facing potential prison time, Diane pled guilty to reduced charges, felony forgery, and theft attempt. She received 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay full restitution. Most satisfying? The judgment became part of public record. Anyone Googling Diane Wright's name now found news articles about her conviction. Her reputation as a financial expert was destroyed, replaced by the reality: convicted criminal fraud. It's been 4 months now since the court ruling. The inheritance has been fully distributed, the investment accounts are in my name, Ruth's primary residence sold for $215,000, and the rental property is generating steady income. Tyler and I have had to rebuild our relationship. The fact that he initially doubted me, that he believed his mother's lies over my truth, damaged something fundamental between us. We're in marriage counseling now, working through it. He's genuinely remorseful, and he's cut his mother off almost entirely. Diane has limited supervised contact with Jackson. Once a month for 2 hours, at a public park with Tyler present. She's not allowed alone time with our son. She's not welcome in our home. The woman who tried to steal my inheritance now has virtually no access to her grandson. The rental property income goes straight into Jackson's college fund. I've invested the inheritance principal conservatively, index funds, bonds, nothing risky. Ruth wanted this money to provide security for me and Jackson, and that's exactly what it's doing. Most days, I feel at peace. I protected Ruth's legacy. I proved Diane was a criminal. I got justice. Diane's life has fallen apart in exactly the way she deserved. Her social circle knows what she did. You can't keep a criminal conviction quiet in a place like Nashville. Her kids from her first marriage have distanced themselves, embarrassed by her actions. Her financial expertise is now a punchline. She works part-time at a Target now, having lost all credibility in professional circles. Sometimes I think about that moment in the attorney's office when Diane presented her forged documents, smirking at me like she'd won. She had no idea I'd fight back. She thought I was weak, easily manipulated, someone who'd just accept defeat. She was wrong. So that's my story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving them wrong, it's proving them criminal. If this story resonated with you, I'd be grateful for your support, whether that's a like, a comment, or joining this community for more stories like this. Drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with an in-law who treated you like garbage while pretending to care about family? I'd love to hear your experiences. And if you're dealing with something similar right now, document everything and get legal help immediately. Forensic experts exist for a reason. You're not powerless. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where